Today we're going to be talking about success stories when it comes to diversity and inclusion in our public schools. But before we get to that, we thought we'd show you a little bit of the landscape of what schools actually look like in the city by the numbers. So segregation in New York City's public schools. First up here, the color of enrollment. This is a pie chart. It's very colorful, but those colors actually represent something. New York City's 1.1 million public school students. The majority of them, 40%, happen to be Latino. If you look at the numbers, the further breakdown goes to students who are Black are 17.1% of the system, and Asian students make up 15.5%, and white students make up just below 15% of the city's public school system students. So taking a deeper dive into those numbers, segregation and poverty. 76.5% of New York City's public school students live in poverty. And if we look at those numbers, according to a UCLA Civil Rights Project study, the typical African-American student attends a school where 69% of the students are low income, commonly called these poverty schools. Now, if you look at a typical Latino student in New York City's public school system, the number is about 65%. But an even starker number is looking at whites in the city school system. They attend schools that are typically less than 30% of poverty. Now, this comes into Title I and all sorts of funding and free lunch numbers, but the numbers are pretty stark. Now, this is what we're up against. And when we get into the A block, we're gonna see how some people in the system are working to change it in the A block.
Okay, so Brian just gave us a sobering look at segregation and student poverty levels in our schools. So now let's learn about schools and school districts which are becoming less segregated. Some of the causes are complex, like gentrification and rezoning, but our next guest will help us understand both the broader picture and some of the more local, day-to-day things that educators are doing to create this change.
Clarence G Ellis is the superintendent of school districts of schools for District 17, covering some of Central Brooklyn's neighborhoods undergoing major population shifts like Crown Heights. Welcome to BK Live, Superintendent.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We're also happy to be joined by Clara Hemphill, the founding editor of the Inside Schools website at the New Schools Center for New York City Affairs. Clara, in fact, has a new book out called New York City's Best Public Pre-K and Elementary Schools, and she'll tell us all about that too. Welcome to BK Live.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, both of you. Clarence, let's start with you.
Sure.
Brian mentioned gentrification and rezoning, these kind of really big things, but tell us briefly how they're affecting segregation and integration in our schools.
Well, in District 17, we're predominantly African American and Caribbean American students and their families. Around 15% Latino students, and the remainder a mixture of 14 other cultures. What's happening is because District 17 Crown Heights is a very up-and-coming, hot neighborhood, there are gentrifying residents moving to the neighborhood. I look at it not so much as just, most people equate gentrification with white, but no, it's just upper middle class people buying high-priced homes that are coming to our neighborhoods. The thing is that there are way more people moving to our neighborhood than are entering our schools. So my job is to make sure our schools are attractive to everyone. What that calls for is adding more cultural, dramatic programs, art, dance, martial arts, in addition to analytic and linguistics programs. So that makes it attractive to the newcomers in the neighborhood.
So, Clara, you have a new book that highlights some of the best pre-K all the way to to the grade 6 level, to grade 5 before you hit that middle school. So we just heard from the superintendent, a lot of these parents opt out for private schools. Does New York City have a marketing issue or a curriculum issue with regards to getting those students into the public schools?
New York City has a lot of issues. It's partly marketing and it's partly the actual quality of the school. But the good news is that there's dozens of very good elementary schools. I think the schools are getting better overall. And although things are highly segregated, there are neighborhoods and schools that are managing to buck the trend and enroll kids of different races and income levels.
Clara, how are you measuring success? within the book?
That's a very good question. We don't think test scores tell you what you need to know. Test scores tell you about past performance. They don't tell you the direction a school is going in. So what we look for, we look a little bit at test scores, I'm not going to lie, but what we look for is level of engagement. Are the kids happy, paying attention, focused on their work?
Excellent.
So, Superintendent, if we're looking at the landscape of where schools stand now with the influx of new people, how quickly do you think schools change and the whole influx of new people, if they choose to send their children to the schools in the district versus going to private schools, what's that tide like to really make the student body look like the neighborhood?
I can give you an example of one of our schools in particular, PS 705, Brooklyn Arts and Science Elementary School. They call it BASE. It's on St. Mark's and Classen. It used to be the old PS 22, which phased out for low performance. It started around 2012. There were less than 200 students, predominantly students of color. Now there are around 400 students, and it's 50% students of color and 50% white students. The issue is that
How unusual is that? That seems like that even
It's
split,
very-
Yeah.
looking at that chart to go to 50.
it's actually because the principal is very dynamic, and she uses some very innovative programs to attract the newcomers to the neighborhood, and not just based on academics. Again, it's about exposure. It's about cultural arts programs. So what she has is a model called a studio model. All the students are exposed to, drama, art, dance, all the cluster programs we call them, in addition to English and math. But what she does, they also have to pick a studio, which would be the following week. That's what they get after school. It's a concentration, a cultural concentration. And that's what draws families to that school. The challenge is that the majority of the children of color in the school are in the upper grades.
Gotcha.
And the white students are in the lower grades.
Just moving in with
Coming
their
in.
young.
So they may be trying to hang on until while they can still afford to stay in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right.
Does that diversity extend to this to the teaching pool as well? If we have the
Absolutely.
50-50 split, it shows in the teachers as well.
There's a very good balance of our the teaching pool in the entire district.
Yeah.
That's just one representative school. And the other reason I highlighted that school is they also have a diversity plan in place. So no matter what the demographics of the overall building lead to down the line, she's reserved 40% of her seats for Title I students and students of color. So no matter where they move to, no matter how the neighborhood directs the neighborhood, these students will always have a seat in their school.
Clara, how important has diversity within the student body and within the teaching body been to successful schools?
Leadership is absolutely critical. You have to have a leader who cares about all kinds of parents and all kinds of kids. We found that the most successful schools were the ones where the leader really made an effort to make everybody feel welcome.
So speaking of those parents then, inside schools, any person who has a kid in New York City is all over your website. So have you gotten a feeling of how much diversity matters to parents, whether it's just like an amenity that could be nice to have, like if you're buying a house, if it had a pool, that would be awesome. But if the floors are good and it has crown moldings, you'll still move in. Like how essential is that balance to parents making school choice?
I think for a lot of parents it is an amenity and not a crucial part of a school. I'd like to convince them that it's a crucial part of the school.
Yeah.
But most parents will pick quality first, whatever their race.
Whatever their race, yeah. So quality first. Clarence, how have the children been responding to the places that are doing this integration successfully?
Children are, quite frankly, children are never the issue. Children get along. Children naturally love each other. They're tolerant of each other. They learn all the other untoward habits from us adults. So the children are wonderful. I do think that in a diverse setting they thrive. They learn to become better problem solvers. They deal with complex issues with much more depth. And they perform better in terms of college and career readiness. Not only just going to college, but reducing attrition and graduating college. The diverse setting has all the seeds towards, that blossoming.
Tell us about your 10-step process?
Well, when I first came to the district, of course, I analyzed the test data. When I was getting ready for my interview, I had to know what the scores were and what have you. But I also looked at social emotional programs and the tone of building, the culture, meaning suspensions, how children and staff got along with each other. So I created a relationship with New York University. We have a program called the TACD Initiative, Technical Assistance Center on Disproportionality. What I noticed that was the majority of the suspensions in District 17, the children of color received inordinate punishments for infractions that didn't match the punishment. So what we looked at was changing the tone of the building, the root cause of these behaviors. And our teachers were trained in a culturally relevant education, learning where the children came from and how we could address their needs. For instance, I remember as a young teacher, I was disciplining a 6th grade student, and he wasn't paying attention. I said, well, look at me. And he told me, look, where I'm from, he's from South America. Without looking at adults in their eyes, a sign of disrespect. Yeah. It clicked for me early. So these are the kind of things we try to teach our staff to learn about their students and where they come from.
Okay, so Clara, that's an example of a superintendent. Josh Wallach was here when we had our town hall on segregation in schools, and we were pressing him for a plan. We heard 10 points here. Has the city come up with a comprehensive plan to tackle this?
The city has not come up with a comprehensive plan to tackle this, and I think there's a lot more that the city can be doing that they're not doing now. I agree with the school's chancellor, Carmen Farina, that top-down solutions don't work. Right. I think there's a lot more that the city can be doing to encourage parents to voluntarily integrate the schools. I don't think busing is the answer. I don't think forcing parents to go to schools that they don't want to send their kids to is going to work. But I think the city can do a lot more to encourage the kinds of natural integration that has been going on in some of the schools that we've discovered.
So as it stands now, and I'm going to ask you not to just bust in with all the schools in your district, but where could we be in Brooklyn and plunk down ourselves and have the best chance of having a diverse school for our kids? Like, if you could spin a wheel, where would you land that says my kids are going to get a diverse education that looks like our city? There's some interesting neighborhoods like Bergen Beach, way out there. They don't immediately come to mind.
And that's a place where there's been a lot of immigration from Haiti, China, Korea, Pakistan, and Russia.
To get to Bergen Beach.
Well, New York's been built by immigrants, hasn't it? And I think some of these immigrant groups may not have the prejudice that those of us who've been here for a long time have. There isn't a huge gap between rich and poor, and that's a place where neighborhood integration, I think, has been quite successful.
Ethnic and income diversity.
Exactly.
I have one school in particular, amongst many, but PS 249, it's on Caton and Marlboro. It's on the outskirts of District 17. Traversing District 15 and other districts. A very well-mixed school, very high-performing. A lot of L students with students that are English language learners. However, their academic performance is off the charts, and the principal is just very well-rounded. Our Chancellor Farina, takes this idea of diversity very seriously. However, to echo what Clara mentioned just now, it has to come from the building leader, because if it's top-down, that's only you get compliance, you won't get commitment. You need commitment in your heart to make sure that your school is diverse and gives children what they need.
Commitment versus compliance.
Yes, and you need it from all ends, please.
If I could jump in, I think it depends a lot on the superintendent as well. It doesn't just come from the principals. I think the superintendent can set a tone in your district. You tell the principals you have to make your schools welcoming, you have to have school tours, you have to recruit people. You don't just sit back and wait for it to happen.
That's true. That's true.
All right.
Okay, 100 more just like you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Problem is fixed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Here's the book. Check out New York City's best public pre-K elementary schools. Thanks, Clara.
Thanks a lot.